EIK is preparing for the 2024 conference happening in October. I hope all of us are aware of the same. I think, first of all, I want to acknowledge that this is an open and public discussion. We have opened it up not only to our members as EIK, but also to the general public. So we are grateful for all those who have been able to join, even as we wait for others to join. The discussion we expect to be very rich and engaging. That's why I think we have decided we can start as early as 5 minutes past, so that we are able to allow sufficient time for the presentation, as well as allow time for you to be able to engage with the speakers, be it through Q&A, being through adding your own comments and inputs to the discussion. We have all our speakers here, and I would like to pretty much start. And for today, our discussion, again, as I said, or you have seen in our poster, building up on our topic for the conference, which is on the climate change and the energy transition. We want to discuss today matters of the power supply and the energy transition, as well as now a case study in terms of environmental security. What effects or what are the developments that we see in this case where we are actually moving or transitioning to the renewable energy? What are the environmental security issues that come to be, and are these issues actually being sufficiently addressed? Are the communities who are actually affected, other than the initial or the initial environmental impact assessments, but what actually happens in the long run for the communities that happen to be affected or living with the impacts of these developments that are happening, especially the energy in the energy development or the development of energy infrastructure. So we have all of our speakers on board. I hope they can put their cameras on so that we can be able to see them for this presentation. And I do not want to take much time, but then we have Mr. Clifford Siocha. I can see you. I hope you can probably put on your mic to make sure that we can hear you, but I would like for you to go ahead, and then we'll be able to moderate the chat and allow people to put in their questions and their feedback also in the chat, as well as in the Q&A section. Thank you. Karibuni wote.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Zelda, and thanks for the introduction. You'll allow me then share my screen even as we begin. Kindly confirm if you can get to see it.
The presentation is yet to load. Are you able to make up to share your screen? Let me see.
Yeah, shortly.
Okay.
How is it now?
Yes, it's now. We can see it. Probably you can put it on presentation mode. We can see your screen.
Thank you. Okay, again, good afternoon, members and equally non-members and everyone that has attended this talk this afternoon. My name is Clifford Siocha. I'm an environmental and social practitioner. Currently, I work as a senior environmental safeguard sustainability officer in the Ministry of Energy and Ketraco. So that's where I serve as at now, and therefore will give us the perspective of the sector towards energy transition. But the focus, even as we look at the environmental security, is on energy supply and its role in energy transition in Kenya. So we'll begin. Just to set trolling, is that as a country, we've set quite a number of targets towards net zero, and these are within the national targets as what you usually call the NDCs, or the National Determined Contributions. And it's towards achieving quite a number of greening aspects by 2032, or moving towards net zero. But we've targeted ours at 2032, and therefore there are a number of activities, there are a number of projects that come in to get to realize that. I will not go to the other activities, but allow me to zero in to what are we doing then in the energy sector, and what is the role of energy sector and specifically to the subsector of power supply. Just to let us know is that the energy sector is huge, and in the power sector, because you have the petroleum bit, but in the power sector we have three subsectors. We have generation, we have transmission, and we have distribution. And therefore the supply here is majorly transmission and distribution, but mine will majorly be on transmission because that's where my expertise is as of now. And therefore, when you look at the energy transition space, we are majorly looking at decarbonizing the energy pathways and getting to limit the emissions that have been in the call it the business as usual scenario, and getting to reduce those emissions towards net zero. And therefore here we'll be looking at geothermal energy, we'll be looking at wind energy, we'll be looking at solar energy, and that's at the generation point, but those are not the only sources of energy. We'll be looking at our energy mix, but this forms the bulk of what we have as of now in the renewable energy expansion.
Hi, Cliff. Sorry, your screen is not, we can see your presentation at this time. Maybe you're
Yes.
hidden it? Okay. Just
okay, thank you. And therefore, while we're looking at shifting to renewables, that is not the whole essence about energy transition. We have, sorry, we have other aspects in that area where we again look at energy efficiency initiatives. We look at industrial efficiency, we look at building efficiency, we look at appliances. This is at the user level. But when you look at the sector level, or the sectoral level, to the point that someone gets power in the house, you also get to look at the efficiency that comes into it. You look at limiting of transmission losses. We are looking at quite a number of things that get into that, and we get to realize that equally any generator, be it wind, be it solar, be it geothermal, be it nuclear, has its CO2 coefficient. And therefore, it's not like they're 100% green, but you look at the intervention when you look at energy transition or any other greening aspect in any other industry. So you look at the intervention itself. But to get the increase the efficiencies to limit the CO2 coefficient that is associated with any other generator that be. And therefore, therefore, when you're looking at energy transition, you're looking at, of course, the renewables bit, energy efficiency, and the offsetting bit of that can come from different technologies that are used. And therefore, pretty much this is what I was explaining. Therefore, what forms the energy transition is a shift to renewables, and again, getting co-benefits or getting to address the real issues as addressing the SDG. When we're looking at the energy space, we're looking at, or more so in the transmission space, we're looking at key and principally to SDG 7, which is about energy and energy economy. Then we're looking at infrastructure. We're looking at infrastructure innovation, that's SDG 9, and having to have resilient infrastructure. Then you're looking at climate action, which is SDG 13. And the other core benefits, you cannot limit energy to those three SDGs because energy is an enabler and touches each and every other SDG as is. And of course, as I said, it's an enabler, and it's about powering development and spurring development so that any other interlinked infrastructure to energy also gets to benefit from energy transition, also gets to follow that low carbon pathway. What's our current energy mix so that we can get to appreciate the efforts that Kenya has made so far? We pride ourselves of quite a rich mix. We are not yet there, but what we can see is that we have over 6 sources of power in Kenya, and the bulk of that is a component of green energy. We have 30% at hydro. These are reported as 2021. I know there could be shifts here and there, so therefore it could be some shifts in the pie chart. We have 30% from hydros, 16% from wind, 41% from geothermal. We have thermal. Thermal here means diesel generators, we have 2% from imports and 1% from solar. That is as at 2021, because I know there are a number of solar farms that have been commissioned after that. But we have challenges. As much as we have this rich mix as it is, there are challenges of reliability, stability of power supply, grid coverage, rural electrification, affordability remaining key challenges. And therefore, when you look at that, we are yet to get where we can have that, can say that we've done 100% penetration of power. The recent reports were indicating around 70%. That's on access or penetration. But again, that's not enough. You have to look at reliability and stability. And therefore, those are the efforts that the government is trying to do so that we can have that stable grid. Once you have it stable and reliable, then the other economies can follow the same pathway. Therefore, in the Kenya's energy transition pathway, as at 2021, the business as usual scenario, we are seeing we are having a CO2 coefficient of 20 metric tons per annum from the entire energy sector. But the target is to reduce this. And if there are no interventions, then by 2050, you can look at that. We are likely to get to 130 metric tons per annum. But with interventions, then is to have 2050 reaching net zero in the energy sector. Again, what we get to appreciate is that for that effort to be achieved, then there is finances that are required to a tune of 600 billion, which is inclusive of now the efforts or the measures that will have been put in place to ensure that we are there by 2050. And therefore, it requires that we have a quite deliberate effort in getting to have these undertakings in place. And it may not be a very easy aspect when you look at it, but it requires that as a country, then we need to invest along that so that we can limit or we can reduce the carbon pathways in the energy sector.
Apologies, Cliff.
Yes.
I think we have several comments from the participants that would like to see the presentation. Should we present it on your behalf? On our side?
They're not able to see, but I think from my end is showing it's shared.
No, you're not presenting. We cannot see the presentation. We've been looking at you.
Sorry. Can you then share it from your end? Because here it indicates that I've shared.
Sorry. Okay, let me have our support make a share with you the screen. Thank you. Apologies to members. We will correct that right now.
How about now?
Not yet. I can still. Okay, now it's there. Yes, now we can see.
Okay. Sorry. So should I
put
begin
it on
or
mode? I think you are not so far off. I hope everyone has been following.
Sorry, I think the fifth slide is quite critical for our understanding, so that we can get to appreciate. Over there is put
it on slideshow.
Over there is a pie chart.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Over there is a pie chart, and as I said, this is as at 2021. There could be a bit of some shifts here and there after commissioning of a few projects. When you look at it, you can appreciate that as a country, then our energy mix is quite rich. But as I said, this is not the end to it, because there are a number of other factors that come into the play of energy economy and energy studies, whereby we need to have quite a number of diverse sources to increase what we call redundancy in the energy sector, so that we are not over-reliant on 2 or 3 generators. Perhaps if there be a problem, then the entire country is becomes is out of source to the energy, and therefore what we have as of now is 41% of geothermal. That's what I said. 16% wind, 30% hydros, and 10% these are from diesel generators, 2% imports, and solar at 1%. But as I said, there are challenges that of course, the Ministry of Energy is looking at from different perspectives, using the agencies that are under it, and get to ensure that we have reliability. And as I said, redundancy or reliability is also an aspect of redundancy, which is a function of transmission and a function of distribution, so that we have multiple sources of power getting to power the nation. And there's also an aspect of power trade that also comes into play because Kenya cannot look at itself in power sources and power generation transmission as a country. We have peers around us that we need to get connected to facilitate power trade, and equally to increase the aspect of, I said, redundancy, in case we are at our generation will not be able to meet the kind of power that is required at a given point. Then we're looking at the Kenya's energy transition pathway. This is as a study that was undertaken in 2021, and as at that time, the baseline indicated that we were at 20 metric tons of CO2 coefficient, and without any intervention, then by 2050 we will have gotten to 130 metric tons. That's quite huge on a business as usual scenario. But on energy transition then scenario, by 2050, for us to get to net zero, will require this amount of investment of 600 billion USD, which of course, when you look at now the social economics bit, it translates to around 500,000 new jobs in Kenya by 2050. Now, how do we finance then this pathway? This is through capital markets and through various sources of funds. Could be local, could be international, and also bringing in the, not just the government or the public sector, but also bringing in the private sector to come in and get into finance. We have an aspect of de-risking interventions by implementing policies and mechanisms to reduce the investment risks. Then we have an aspect of green growth, accelerating economic development through energy transition. Therefore, those are some of the ways that we can get to 2050 and attain the net zero. The way forward is, of course, the implementation of the plan, and of course, looking at the timelines here and there and getting to review them according to the plans and the results that will have been achieved along the way to 2050, and leveraging on energy transition to accelerate economic development and the green growth. Then we'll shift now to the core bit. What's the role of reliable power supply in Kenya's energy transition? On to the left is transmission infrastructure. You can see a substation, and you can see a transmission line, which is depicted by the self-standing lattice towers and a substation on the side. And therefore, this is the components, or this is what the transmission system then contains. For those who may not have interacted with this, but you can get to see these lines crisscrossing quite a number of geographical locations as we travel through the country. And therefore, that's what transmission subcomponent or subsector in Kenya then entails. Now, let's look at its role. As I said, we have three subsectors in the energy sector. We have generation, we have transmission, and we have distribution. What is commonly known to the public is the distribution part, because they are the ones, of course, who get the power to our homes. And in bits, we have the generation bit, which to a greater percentage is held by KenGen, but we have many other actors in that area. In that space, we have REREC, we have independent power producers, and then when you come to transmission, there's KETRACO, which then connects the two subsectors. It's an international best practice to unbundle the energy sector. And when you look at jurisdictions that have not unbundled their energy sector, they are facing quite a number of problems. This is a heavy sector, and that's why, for purpose of manageability and for ease of undertaking these projects, then it's an international best practice to have the energy sector unbundled into those three subsectors. What is it then with the power supply? Power supply is about grid extension. These are connected to underserved areas to the national grid. I'll give some examples to that effect. You've heard of the president speak of the Western region, which is a bit underserved because of a missing link between Narok and Bomet, which the ministry is quite accelerating to have that link in place. And therefore, when you look at the grid extension, it's a network of transmission lines. As it is in the road sector, we call those highways that are built by Kenya, they're called highways. And therefore, when you look at the network that is being done under transmission, it's called electricity highways. This is about creating multiple vectors of access, of getting to access energy, so that if you are at one place, perhaps currently I'm in Marsabit. If I'm in Marsabit and my power source probably is from Loyangalani, and Loyangalani is not able to provide power to Marsabit center or town, then I'm able to access power even from Suswa. I'm able to access power from Kisii. I'm able to access power from Mombasa. So that is all about the vector function of the grid extension and getting to connect the underserved areas. We have off-grid solutions. This is being served, of course, not by Ketraco now. We have REREC and even a department within the ministry that is spearheading this. There are areas where it may seem not financially viable to do transmission lines because they are pretty expensive, and therefore you will have off-grid solutions, maybe a solar, to have some mini grid, some few turbines in that area, depending on what is available as a generator. So therefore that place can then be served off-grid. That's what it means. We have an aspect of affordable pricing, which is a function again of the connectability and many other functions. I may not get into the economics of power as of now. Then there's an aspect of modernizing the electricity evacuation. Technology is quite advancing, and as a country we have a mix of transmission infrastructure. There are those that were done at maybe around 1963, getting power from Jinja all the way to Naivasha, then to Juja. And we have some that have been done 2-3 years ago. We have some that are injecting power from on-source green generators, like from Loyangalani, which is the biggest wind farm in Africa, all the way to a hub in Suswa, which then unlocks green power to other places in Kenya, and even with potential of getting that power even to other neighboring countries. We have a technology on using of HVDC. This is high voltage direct currents from Ethiopia all the way to also Suswa, and many others. There are various technologies that are in place, and therefore we have high voltage transmission, which carries power from generation sites to the grid. It doesn't have to be from generation. It can also be matters of reinforcing the grid. But essentially, when you look at high transmission, the node should be generation to what you call load centers. Load centers is where the power is required. But again, we do what you call grid reinforcement from substation to substation, or from load center to load center, to vectorize the grid. We have substation integration, transforming voltages for distribution. We have renewable energy integration. That forms a bit of the modernizing electricity evacuation. Allow me to speak about renewable energy integration, because this forms, again, the bulk of what we're discussing as of now. In renewable energy, we have what we call variable renewable energy sources. These are weather-based renewable energy sources like solar, wind, name them, tidal ranges, and all that. And therefore, the reason why they are called variables is because they are dependent on weather, and therefore you do not have uniform generation throughout the day. And with it comes an issue of voltage regulation, or instability in the grid. And this is an area that quite a number of jurisdictions, including Kenya, we are looking at, so that we can get to minimize the impact that comes with renewable integration into the grid, even as we're speaking about the whole aspect about energy transition, because you may have the grid 100%, but without curing the inherent measures that come with renewable energy integration to the grid, then you will not achieve the whole target of energy transition. And therefore, we are looking at storage facilities for power in times of overproduction and when the load is on low demand, so that that power can be stored somewhere and used at a time of peak demand when probably generation is low. And matters on what you call protection engineering, so that to reduce on operational and maintenance costs that come also with integration of renewable energy. And therefore, there's a lot of studies that go into it, which those who are interested on this side of energy transition on power supply, probably you can get to do more studies into that, to get to realize and to get to know the challenges and the opportunities that are there when it comes to energy transition. These are some of the solutions that I have been speaking about, then about reinforcing the grid. The grid, as any machine, needs to be maintained each and every time. We do not have a uniform demand along the way. Our demand grows with urbanization. Our demand grows with economic development. Our demand grows even with matters on climate change, because soon probably a number of towns may require to have several homesteads fitted with ACs or heating apparatus in the house. That means is a future load that when planners get to look at that, need to put into place and plan in advance. And therefore, that is the work of energy planning. And therefore, when we get to do that, we need to bring in the aspect of reinforcement of the transmission grid by changing transformers here and there, reinforcing transformers, having what you call machines like STATCOM. STATCOM is it makes the grid more smarter about voltage regularization, so that we have voltages moving to where they're required. And of course, as I said, limiting the costs that come with protection engineering, because you may have high voltage coming in at a time that the system does not require such voltage, which brings into a number of aspects that may affect the grid. We have battery energy storage systems. A number of internationals are quite interested in this area, in getting to do R&D, to get to know the material which can be environmentally friendly, cost effective, to come up with batteries that can also be even reused for a long time. So it's an area as environmentalists that we can get to look at. Perhaps if Kenya wants to invest in this, and these batteries, they're immense, they are huge. Probably if they are lead-based and after 20 years they're obsolete, what happens to them? And therefore is an area as environmentalists that we can get to look at and get to do research on some of the solutions that can be put in place to have battery energy storage systems. We have, of course, the whole aspect of having a smart grid. I will not speak to that, but there are a number of things that come into it. The automation, SCADA technology that will come into it. As we also move ahead, the other technologies that are coming in on matters generation, and which will also require integration into the grid, we have green hydrogen, or power from hydrogen. We have nuclear, which we are targeting to have by around 2036. And many others, of course, waste to energy and many other sources that we can have. Then we have an aspect of interconnecting regional power. You would ask, why is it important? Of course, I said about power trade, and I'm still saying about what you call redundancy. A few months ago, the South African power pool has had issues with their power. And you heard of the term load shedding and all that. And therefore, that tells you that no country is independent, or no country can be an island when it comes to power economics. And therefore, there is need for interconnection, as we have highways running from Cape Verde all the way to Egypt. Should be the same, or is the same case also with power, so that we have an African pool. You have with whichever jurisdiction you have a given pool. We have the East African power pool, which the line from Ethiopia all the way to Suswa is part of, which again will go down to Tanzania, all the way to Zanzibar. So every country, not to Zanzibar, Zambia. So every country ought to connect to neighbors for purpose of power trades and opportunity, and for purpose of redundancy in case of any issue. And these lines are bimodal. We can buy from TZ, and TZ can buy from Kenya. That's how they are built. Regional reliable grid. The foundation, of course, the reliable grid is a foundation of renewable energy integration. The map over there just it shows us the network, how it is in Kenya. It forms existing lines and planned lines, and what we have in store, I think this is up to 2045. So that we can have the entire country interconnected. The whole issue is about having probably every county having multiple sources of power and multiple networks for purpose of creating the confidence to investors in getting to invest in those counties. Currently, we are trying to unlock the northern area, or the northern Kenya, which is dependent on thermal energy. Remember the 10% in the energy mix. These guys have been dependent on diesel generators ever since. And a few months ago, those diesel generators had an issue, and the county of Marsabit and part of the northern Kenya were in issues for almost 2 months. And therefore, we are trying to connect them through a number of power lines to wind source in Luangalan, which again is in Marsabit, but so that you can connect to the town, and from Isiolo, so that you can tap the 7 Forks dams, and ultimately that do away with the thermal generators. Number one, they are very expensive to run and to maintain. Number two, of course, the CO2 coefficient of diesel generators, it's quite high. And of course, it translates now to what you pay, even you who lives in Nairobi at the end of the day. And therefore, the foundation of it all is to ensure stability, the capacity of the grid, and the modernization of the grid using the technologies that I've shared there before. We have economic growth and development, which is a key function of the energy sector. Overall, we have, of course, industrial activities, business operations, and job creations. The job creation can be direct and indirect, but there are so many. There's a lot that you can get to do. Energy is an enabler, and without stability and affordability, then it becomes a challenge in getting to have investment in the social economic space. Of course, I've said about that. Socioeconomic space is also an aspect of improved quality of life, technological advancements. I mean, there are so many sectors that are reliant on the energy sector. I can't pin them down. There are quite a number. This 3 is just indicative, but mention any sector, then you have the energy sector in it. I think I've mentioned about the grid technologies. I wouldn't want to delve much into it. How do we then enhance the grid infrastructure to ensure that we are part, so that we facilitate what you call energy transition? Is about modernization. There are a lot of developments each and every day, having microgrids as much as possible, so that to decentralize the grid from a given area, so that you can looking for the word, You can dissociate sort of like if you want to manage a given grid in the northern region, you can manage it without affecting the entire grid of the nation. Then, of course, I've said about decentralization of the same of the energy systems through a rich mix of energy sources. This one can't be understated. Policy and regulatory support. This is about in creating incentives towards the same and creating a good environment, not just for the government, but also for public, for private investors to come into this space. The government is trying a lot to get into PPPs in projects that they are not able to finance. We've seen it in roads, and probably soon we'll be seeing it in the power sector, so that we're able to finance. Globally, even as we come to an end, is that the power supply now on the transmission side, this is on a global perspective, there is almost 40% less financing that is required. Because many investors look at generation and they look at distribution, but many investors forget that there is a key component that links generation and distribution, and therefore, and this is the anchorage of the entire energy sector, and therefore there is a short of it has fallen short almost to 40% of financing, but we've seen some improvements in the entire globe, the realization of what the subsector holds in getting to drive the whole agenda of energy transition. Some of the case studies, I know my colleague will touch a bit on this. We have the Electrocana wind power. These are private investment in Loyangalani in Marsabit. Then from it, of course, we have the Loyangalani Suswa transmission line, which feeds the grid with wind power. We have Olkaria geothermal, almost getting to Olkaria 7 right now. Of course, also feeding the country with clean power. And from it, we have quite a number of lines. I've just mentioned one of them. We have the 400 kV Lesos Kisumu transmission line. For those who come from Kisumu, I think you've realized from around 3 years ago, aspects of outages are minimal. And we've seen the response even from the market towards investment in that area. As I said, in the northern Kenya, we also trying to link it to the grid so that they can benefit from the 90% component of clean power in the grid, so that we can decommission the thermal generators that we have equally in the coastal area, something that we're doing, and soon those thermal generators shall be decommissioned so that we have injection of 90% green energy, or not even 90 now. After we've decommissioned, I think we'll be around 98, so that we have injection of clean energy, both the northern and the coastal area, so to say. So that's the end from me, and asanteni sana kwa kunisikiza. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chilka, for the presentation. I think you've given us an overview in terms of what is happening within the country in terms as we push forward for 100% renewable energy, or the achieving 100% energy transition. And I think I've taken notes in terms of all the technical requirements that are required, all the engineering, and also the impact that it actually has in terms of the far-reaching to, as we say, the last mile. And I think, as you have just alluded to, our second speaker, Mr. Omondi Okwanyi, is here also with us. And from his angle, we want to be able to understand what is actually now the impact of such development projects that are happening, comparing to what has been the practice thus far, and actually now what is the continued impact. I mentioned before, not only a matter of the initial environmental impact assessment, but what is actually now the result of all this development that has happened for or the long term, that the actual communities that are affected or nearby this large power systems. I think for many of us, we could tell, be it, let's say, for example, in Turkana or in Marsabit, have we actually been giving justice to those communities who are now the ones powering our development in the urban areas and in large industries? For now, I'd like to invite Mr. Omondi Okwanyi to join us and to make his presentation, which will be focused on environmental security. And his case study will be specifically on the geothermal energy production, where he'll be able now to give us an overview of what actually, building up on what Mr. Siocha has given us, so that we are able actually now to see what is actually the situation on the ground. Are we actually being environmentally conscious? Are we being sustainable in the long run in our energy transition? We welcome questions in the chat. I would take them after the two presentations are done, but you are welcome to put your comments in the chat as well as on the Q&A. We'll be able to take them through with our speakers once Mr. Okwanyi has done his presentation. Welcome, Mr. Okwanyi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Secretariat. I don't know, let me try to share my presentation. I hope I am not challenged. Let's see. Are you able to share my presentation? Oh, no. Yes, I can share it.
Yes, you can share your presentation to the listeners. Yes, you can definitely put a question or your input as well on the chat. And I believe there's also an option for Q&A. Just giving your feedback even as the presentation continue. Once the presentation is done, we'll be able to address the questions raised. Thank you. We can see your screen, Mr. Okwanyi. Probably you can put it on slideshow presentation.
Yes. There you are. Okay. Let me just a minute. Give me a minute. I'm an old folk. I'm not Gen Z, so internet is a problem for me. But I hope you can see it now.
We can see your screen. Maybe you could put it on slideshow, because at the moment we see everything else, or we see together with it. Yes.
You can see can you see my presentation now?
Yes, we can see your presentation. I will suggest you put it on slideshow.
All right. Thanks. Thank you so much. I don't know how to put it on. I think, yeah, that's all I can do. I'm not, as I said, I'm not IT tech, so you will just bear with me.
Guide you, probably up on top, on the tab. Yes.
Yes.
Just above there should be slideshow.
Here?
No. Oh yeah, even there.
Can you see it now?
Not yet. Are you able to go to the top there where it says slideshow on the upper tab?
Okay. There.
Yeah, there. From the beginning, yes.
Here. Can you see it now?
It's yet to load. Probably you could click on it again.
If I click on it again, it's taking me to another page. Probably you can share it for me.
Okay, let me share it from you from our end.
Yes. But just to start us off, the earlier presenter, Clifford, made a very good presentation on the energy transition. So what I'm trying to do here is I will not go into details pointing of that transition, but I will point out the environmental security aspect, how such transition has an effect to the communities around this project. So I'm looking at my presentation is looking at the project in Samburu. That is, it's the border of Samburu and Turkana. The project has not started, but it's a proposed geothermal project in Suguta Valley. Most of you know Suguta Valley. If you're in Kenya, you've heard of different insecurity issues in Suguta Valley. And also, I will also present a case on Narok County, that is the border of Narok and Kajiado County, that is Suswa, and a bit of giving 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 some examples in Baringo and also giving some examples in Olkaria. So my presentation basically focuses on geothermal energy, or the transitioning of green energy in Kenya, but with a focus of geothermal energy. I don't know if the Secretariat managed to.
We are working on it. Just a minute, but we are preparing to share for you the screen. Hope you could just go ahead.
All right. So
go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So if you can see if you can currently see my presentation, what I'm trying to explain, this topic, or rather this is research we did, and it's a publication, it's a book chapter we published with 3 people. So it was a research done by 3 individuals, myself and Evelyn. Evelyn is situated at Bonn University. She's working with Bonn Institute of Conflict, Bonn Center for Conflict. And then the other author is also Brian Okot, who also contributed a lot in this piece. But of course, unfortunately, Brian left. Brian died, passed away before the publication is made. This book chapter is going to be published in September. So those of you who are interested, you will be able to read what we have, what our research work in September. So the book chapter is coming in September. But what I want to put your attention is, and the first presenter has already done that, is, I mean, Kenya is taking a very big lead when it comes to geothermal energy. And of course, in the Horn of Africa, Kenya is the lead when it comes to geothermal energy. And our geothermal energy road started in 1956. And then, we joined the big giants when it comes to green energy. But our first, the gazettement of the green energy came in 1971. And then the Olkaria development started with the Daniel Moi regime in 1981. So from 1981, we see a very big increase of geothermal energy in Kenya. And so Kenya has a very good name when it comes to this green energy transitioning around the world. And also, if you look at those of you who have the knowledge of climate action, you will find that Kenya has a very good name at the international level. We have very good legal text. We have very good policies on sustainable development, energy, and so on. So there is a very very good name concerning green transitioning as far as Kenya is concerned. And if you look at the energy sector, you find that there's a lot of international investors that are investing in the geothermal energy. Some of them I've mentioned. If you can see my screen, I don't know if the Secretariat managed to share my screen.
Yes, screen is there now. Kindly also lift up your voice. We're losing you in some parts.
All right. I will try. Maybe I put on my earphones. Can you hear?
Speak up again. We may not hear you.
Am I loud enough?
No, I think if you did without the earphones.
Then I will try to shout, but I hope I can be heard clear. So what I'm saying is that the energy sector, there's been a lot of interest from the private sectors in Kenya investing in green energy. And also there's a lot of international interest, and there are different international institutions such as World Bank. The Germans are interested in geothermal in Kenya, or rather green energy in Kenya. Also, Japan is also interested, many more. So there's a lot of international institutions interested in the green projects in Kenya. Also, private sectors within Kenya are interested in green energy. So there's a lot of interest in that sector. And so this project, or rather this research, our focus really is on green transition. But the question we are asking here is this green transitioning just? So we are looking at, our research focuses on communities within this energy development. We focus on communities in Suswa, we focus on communities in Baringo, Salale, and we also focus on communities where the proposed Suguta trap was made. So we do research in these communities, ask them about this energy transition and so on. So, and it shall be very clear as we move forward. So the main question in our research is whether the geothermal is a just energy transition in Kenya. So we look at various energy laws, we look at various laws that help this transition. But what I want to put into your attention is that, these areas where, such as Suguta Trough and Suswa, where we do our research, many of you would know that these areas have been neglected, and history can give us, history can show us that these areas such as Suguta Valley, that is the north, has been neglected by government. So, for example, session paper number 10 of 1965, the economic paper number 1 neglected this area. But since the beginning of Kenya Vision 2030, which was brought by session paper number 10 of 2012, and also session paper number 8 of 2012, you see some rapid development in areas north, areas such as Suswa, where we did our research. So you see there's a lot of interesting projects coming in these areas, but the communities living in these areas, that is the pastoral communities, they are affected by this project. So we did some interviews since 2018 up to 2024, trying to understand how these projects, these geothermal energy projects, affect these young people, these communities. And so what transpired as I shall move forward, we focus on environmental security as a theory, trying to understand the connection between the state defining green transition and the community and their environment, the ecosystem within where these projects are. So we try to compare those. And as I shall be clear further, you find that the geothermal energy is projected in Kenya, and Kenya has a very good name when it comes to green transition out there, but you find that there's a contestation geothermal development and energy poverty. So the Maa community, or rather the pastoral community in these areas, they are affected by the developments of these projects. Number one, you all know that the Community Land Act is a very good statutory law which protects the community land. But you find that where these projects are, Community Land Act has not been implemented. And currently, Community Land Act is in Parliament for amendment, but these projects are going on. So you find that a lot of communities are losing their land because of this project. And where this green energy, or rather geothermal energies are, these communities, their land is more communal. It's not private, but you can see there's a lot of privatization. If you go to Suswa, you will find that there's a lot of privatization of land in this area because projects are coming. And Suswa, for example, has been facing this challenge because the geothermal energy is coming there. And also there's the aspect of the SGR, which is going to connect to the geothermal. So there's a lot of rush for land in this area because of this geothermal project coming, and also the SGR coming. If you go to the Suguta Trough, that is the border between Turkana and Samburu County, you will find that there's also that contestation, border contestation between Turkana County and Samburu County because of the proposed Suguta Trough. And also Lapset, which is a very big road and railway, it's a project going to South Sudan and also Ethiopia, is passing the Suguta Trough. So you find that there's a huge contestation, which has led to some conflict among the Turkana and the Samburu community because of the. So these are some of the evidences we collected in our interviews, and we are trying to measure that, or we are trying to equate that to the concept of environmental security. So if I just take you through what we mean by we focus on the concept security from the Copenhagen School of Security. Those of you who study security, you will know that the Copenhagen School of Security defines security in various ways: the absence of threats and also absence of fear. So for the state, the geothermal development is a mechanism to remove threats, adding a grid to the state, adding energy to the state. It's a contestation between modernization and the environment. The Maa community, their way of life is being affected by this geothermal development. But for the state, it's about modernization. So, but if you look at environmental security, environmental security is a garden of so many cases. Environmental security has a biocentric focus where we look at the threat within the ecosystem, environmental risks. You look at different aspects of geological changes coming this ecosystem and so on. But what our focus here is the normative nature, where the normative nature, we mean the concern within the ecological security. So we look at the communities in Suswa, the Maa communities in Suswa, how this geothermal is going to affect them. For the state, geothermal is going to add some grid into some energy into the national grid. But for the Maa community, it's a risk of their ecosystem, a risk of their community. So there's a contestation between human survival or community survival, but the state and the state interest. So there's a state interest. The state wants to add the energy grid, and there is human survival, that is the pastoral survival. So you find that the pastoral communities are affected by this community, this project. So what we are asking here in terms of investigating is who benefits from this green energy? Is it the pastoral communities or people who live in the capital cities like us? Because if you go to these pastoral communities, they don't even access, some of them, many of them do not have energy. So who benefits from this energy, from this green energy? So, and also we are interrogating what this green energy means, yeah, right? And what are the threats the government is trying to remove when it comes to bringing green energy? So it's a contestation between the community and the government initiative. So if you have a question, sorry, if it's me, and I will answer to that concern, but otherwise I will continue. So if you can see, I'm not sure if you can see this this table, but if you look at the table currently, geothermal in Kenya has about 810 megawatts, and most of this geothermal come from Olkaria. And as I said earlier, geothermal is the leading, and I think the earlier presenter said that it adds up to 41%, about 40% there. So, and then there are projects which are coming, such as the Susua, which we did a lot of research there in Susua, and then there is also Bugoria and Salale. We have Paka, we have Urosi, and so on. These are going to add 100 megawatts each when they are completed. And then we also have Menengai in Nakuru, which is also adding something into the grid. And Menengai has 3 phases, phase 1, phase 2. But currently, I would want to emphasize that, you know, hydroelectric and geothermal is the lead. So you find that the government puts hydroelectric energy at around 800 and something, but there are other small hydros coming in as well. But geothermal is 810. But if you look at government reports, it says about 863. So there's a slight difference there. And again, if I take you to where these geothermals are, I'm not sure if you can see my map. The Secretary, can you see my map?
We can move to the next. Yes, now we can see the map.
Yes. So if you look at where geothermal is in Nairobi, in Kenya, geothermal is concentrated in the rift. That is from the North Rift all the way to the South Rift. But one of the problems with this geothermal, because you know we are talking of green transitioning and we are talking of sustainable development, is that if you ask engineers, they will tell you that for geothermal to be sustainable, there is need for water, you know, sustainable water. And already Olkaria is facing some water challenges where the government is even thinking of generating water from Lake Naivasha. If you look at the Suguta Trap, for example, where the Suguta Trap, if you can see my map, it's up somewhere there. So these areas, all these red, you can see these are areas where the geothermal energy will be. And these areas have challenges of water. Therefore, there is a great debate when it comes to the sustainability of geothermal potential in Kenya. Because countries such as Japan, Ireland, Indonesia, Philippines are islands. And therefore, we could say that their energy geothermal potential is sustainable because there's plenty of water in these countries. Geothermal can only be sustainable when there is the taxi of water for the energy production is sustainable. But our geothermal is not in the and this is when it comes to sustainability of water. So therefore, it leads us to a question whether this in Kenya sustainable or not, because of issues of water. But again, if I put more of your focus to this paper rather this work, the community. So we are talking about environmental, but we find that there's Olkaria already shows the community, the Maa community have already been affected by the project. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of when it comes to building, there's a lot of some bad, like a lot. If you go to health state, you can experience.
Sorry, let me quickly interject, Mr. Kwan. Probably if you could lift your head, that's when we can hear you clearly. When you go down, we lose you.
All right.
Much
So you find that this Olkaria already has affected Olkaria development has affected the communities in this area, and it has already affected wildlife. And there is evidence how Olkaria drilling has affected this wildlife. There's about already by now Olkaria has about 290 plus wells. And this has affected the wildlife there. It has affected the ecosystem. Some of these Maa communities have been affected by the drilling of these wells and so on. So some of the implications actually of this drilling, or rather the geothermal energy, number one, as I said, is energy poverty. So you find that despite the fact that we are talking about energy or transitioning, the question is, who is benefiting from this energy? Is it the community? Are they benefiting from this energy grid, a national grid? And we see a lot of poor implementation. As I said, Kenya has very good legal text when it comes to energy framework. There's an Energy Act. Of course, there are energy policies. We have session paper number 10, which came up with Vision 2030, talking about transitioning to green energy and environmental security. But there are a lot of challenges, such as environmental governance. There's a problem when it comes to such. Suswa already shows that there's a lot of rush for land. There's a lot of land grabbing. Suguta Valley already shows, or rather the Suguta Trough, already show that these communities are fighting. There's border contestation between Turkana and Samburu when it comes to the proposed Suguta Trough. So, and these communities in this area, they have been neglected over time. History shows how much these communities have been neglected. And the state only applies security in these areas whenever there's a project such as geothermal. But when these projects, but when there's no project in these areas, you find that there is insecurity in this area. There's less police in these areas. There's less security in these areas. But when projects are discovered, then you see the interest of government coming. You see much stronger security. You see people buying land and so on. So what we are saying here is that there is potential for green energy in Kenya, but the problem that we are facing is, the implementation aspect. The legal legal texts are dominated by interest. You know, we have various brucolas as claiming different laws, they are claiming different aspects to protect their interest. And then you find that the development of this energy is dominated by political patronage. And therefore, communities such as the Samburu, or rather the Turkana, in the Suguta Trough, are subject to this development. Communities in Suswa, if you happen to travel to Suswa, you find that the caldera is facing risks of the geothermal development in Mount Suswa. You know, the caves, the tourism attraction of Mount Suswa. Even the communities in this area, they are facing a risk when it comes to the development of geothermal. So let me leave it there so that it can be a discussion. It's better we have a more discussion than myself just talking, but I leave it there with Secretariat so that if there are questions, I can dig in more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kwanyi. Yes, we can have the hands raised for feedback as we go in. I think for me, what I've been able to capture is that definitely we all appreciate that we definitely need to have a decarbonized future, but at what opportunity cost, at what expense of our environment, at what expense to the local communities, to those communities, as you've said, in most cases happen to be neglected. I think probably my mind went straight to what the effect that we're actually experiencing in the Congo and all the conflicts and wars that they currently face. And even though they do not, they're also now neglected in terms of their own development. The matters, I think, as you've raised in terms of the Maasai and Samburu communities, or the already impacts that those who are within the Olkaria area, be it matters of water scarcity, the general biodiversity, has it actually changed for the better, or is it actually not been improved? It has not actually been an improvement. And I think you raised a very pertinent question, that what does green energy mean? Is it just because it's production, or that it does not release the carbon emissions during its the energy production, but what about all the steps that were taken for it actually to be set up, and what is the long-term effect in this case? I would like to open it up now to everyone. I will first go to those who have raised their hands so that they're able to give in their input. I have seen the questions within the chat as well as the Q&A session, but for now I will have Magdalene Giroux. Your hand is raised. Probably you can unmute and give in your feedback, and we'll be able to, I think, let me have like 3 people speak to us, giving their input on mic, and then we'll go to the Q&A. Are you able to speak, Magdalene? As we try to unmute Magdalene for now, maybe I could raise a question. It's not a question. Let me quickly read the chat that we have from Christine Ogoti. She says, while geothermal energy is cleaner than fossil fuels, it still has the environmental effects. Drilling and extracting heat from the Earth's crust can disrupt local ecosystem and release trace gases. Yes, I think Mr. Kwanyi has alluded to that in his presentation as well. If I go to the Q&A question, Mr. Mugambi says, I think this is directed to the first presenter, Mr. Cliff Siocha. We could probably come back and answer this question. How effective are the smart grid systems as energy saving or energy efficient approach? How effective are the smart grid systems in energy saving and energy efficiency?
Thank you, Mugambi. Yeah, and I appreciate for the question. But remember, what I was presenting on is not on the consumption side. On the consumption side is you can have a blend of the two, where you have smart systems and energy saving devices, of course. Bearing in mind that recently, was it last year, at during the time we were having Africa Climate Summit, the how do you call it? The Energy and Petroleum Regulation Authority gazetted the rules on feed-in tariffs. I can't tell whether they're operational as at now, but that could be an answer to be answered by, and a question to be answered by the authority or the regulator. But from a sectoral side, from a supply function, the smart systems is what will work, because from our end, we don't look now at the energy saving option. But of course, from the consumption side, from probably at industrial level, at a household level, that's something that is highly welcome, so that you can limit the load on the growth or the unwarranted use of excess energy at that consumption level. But of course, at distribution and at transmission, as said, now the smart technologies come in to ensure that we have a limit on transmission losses. Remember, if we are generating, let's say 300 megawatts, and when you get to do an audit, probably you've lost around 23% of that, it translates to a loss in income, a loss in the opportunity cost that we will have gotten from that, and many others. And even whatever my presenter or my fellow presenter said, on the other, of course, with any other project are impacts, and therefore does not relate well that the intervention really gives the desired outcome at the long run, and therefore the smart or making the grid smart now works well from our end as a supply function. Thanks.
We had hands raised. Magdalene, are you able to speak now?
I can. Thank you, Secretariat. My name is Magdalene, and I would like to ask Omondi the issue of water challenges within the plant. What could be the challenge? What could be the solution? And the other thing is, the last time I visited one of them, they were telling us that they pump water out, they produce energy, and the water is pumped back to the system. So the issue of sustainability, I'm trying to connect the point you talked of. Sustainability is an issue, and I'm relating that to what I was told, that the water is pumped out to produce energy and then is sent back to the system. Kindly clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Come up, Mr. Okwani. We cannot hear you.
You cannot hear me?
Now we can hear you. Just like come up a bit.
Yes.
Much better.
Much better? Yes. As I said earlier, I'm not an engineer, but I've had contact with a lot of engineers. For example, a very good engineer who has been the lead in Olkaria is an engineer from Peru, and there are also some engineers from Japan who I've talked to when it comes to the geothermal energy. Our focus here, as I said earlier, is the community, how these projects are affecting. But the interesting bit of the sustainability of the energy, we asked questions concerning how the sustainability of geothermal comes about. But what happens is, because water is used to generate, the geothermal, there's drilling, and then after the drilling, the water is taken to the surface. So, for example, the Olkaria grids, Olkaria wells have about 290, probably they are 300 by now, and then water is sent down to the surface to bring up to bring up the steam, and so that the energy can be produced. Engineers will explain that quite much more than myself, but there is need for sustainability of that water. The geothermal in Japan, for example, geothermal in Philippines and Indonesia are categorized as sustainable geothermal energy because there's plenty of water. But if you look at my map, I just showed you a map of where the geothermals in Kenya are. You find that these areas are challenged by water. scarcity. You know, the Rift Valley and the South Rift have a challenge of water. Already, I think the government is projecting of using Lake Naivasha's water to serve the geothermal energy in Olkaria. If you look at Suswa, for example, where Suswa is located, there is scarcity of water in Suswa, and therefore the sustainability of using water to send to the surface to bring the steam is a challenge. So, and Suguta Valley, and if some of you have been to Suguta Valley, if you've been to Suguta Valley, you will know that the Suguta trough is going to face a lot of challenges because there's scarcity of water in that area as well. So water, indeed, engineers will explain this much better than myself, that water is needed for the geothermal energy to operate. But these areas where we're doing research has a scarcity of water. Sorry about that. You know, international, you know, online, there's a lot of disturbance, so don't mind about that. The young man has come from school.
Apologies accepted. Probably could have any other input from any of the members before we move to that in terms of sustainability of geothermal, even though it seems to be a cyclic movement of the water that is used. Is it actually, or what is the impact? I think I get the presenter's perspective in the sense that our geothermal is located in areas which are relatively water or already experience water scarcity. So there's that challenge in terms of we may have the water to do the whole energy generation, but are these communities able to be water secure for, I believe, like household use, household needs? I see more hands are raised. I would go to Mr. Edwin Oko.
Yes, thank you to the presenters again. I think this session has come in at such a good time. My only question to Mr. Okwan, from probably just the research work and maybe the interaction with the communities and these projects, what they have done is that I believe every planning stage and development stage of some of these projects, right from the pre-feasibility studies to the feasibility studies, there is always that component of CSR and just having the positive impact of the communities. And you look at the reports, even the study reports for majority of this project, you see a very serious plan on how to just mitigate some of these impacts to the community, as well as just how do we call it, elevating the lives of the communities around. Of course, any expert who has been involved in the design and the reporting of such projects, there's always that component on the positive impacts being the community around will benefit. So my question would be, where is it a lack of follow through, or is it that these recommendations normally just end up being that recommendations and there is no implementation? Or how exactly do we end up with so much impact in cases of neglect to the communities up to that level, yet the whole sustainability question captures both the social, the environment, and the governance part of the project? So just from your work, where do you think the disconnect is from the reporting and the projections of and even the investment? I believe some of the projects always have in the budget, there is always an investment on CSR. So how do we miss that and still end up with communities with the communities that are suffering?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me clearly? I think my microphone has a problem. Thank you very much for the question. You know, I think that's a very good question, and it's very difficult to answer it, but I'll try to answer it as with much knowledge I have as possible. But you find that in our definition of security, in terms of environmental security, we look at different laws, like the ones I've just mentioned. You know, the national energy policy, environmental, energy policies, energy Act 2019, and we also compare that with acts of parliament, or rather statutory laws such as Community Land Act. So if you look at the implementation of Community Land Act, it's very much wanting. So there's Community Land Act has not been very much implemented, especially in these areas where there is potential geothermal. And you find that areas such as Samburu, there's implementation because it's easier in Samburu because Samburu had land representation. You know, Samburu was ruled by land representation. So these group branches went ahead. It was much easier to register community land through group representation. But areas where there was no group representation, where the land is under trust land, has a lot of challenges to register these communities and the interest of these communities as far as the geothermal is concerned. So you find that these laws already, the Community Land Act is in Parliament for amendment, but these projects are not stopped. The projects are continuing. So you were wondering, then when will the community interest come? Because the law is already in Parliament for amendment, but the projects are going on. And you find that Suswa, there's a lot of the Maa community are communal. So you find that a lot of them are selling their land. There's a lot of private entities coming to Suswa to buy land. Yet the Community Land Act is still in Parliament. And one of our analysis that we use to interrogate these laws and policies, we use political patronage as a yardstick. We also use concepts such as institutional broccolage, where you find that there is a lot of political interests defining these laws, or rather coming up with the ways in which they can, they can advertise and sell these projects. But communities in these areas, if you go to communities such as Parkati, communities in Nachola, that is in Samburu, communities, the Turkana communities in Marti, these communities do not even have energy. But the Suguta trough is going to be in their vicinity, and it's going to affect them. These communities have no electricity, they have no energy. If you look at the Maa communities in Olkaria, for example, they've already been affected by these projects, but some of them do not even have the energy. Susu are the same. So it is just, the neglect of the community can be, it's a fact. If you look at the 1963 section paper number 10, and then 1986 section paper number 1, these communities have been neglected by these laws. And now, because the projects are found, then you can see that there's an interest, government is having an interest in these areas. But of course, so we are using these laws, we are using the concept patronage, or rather political patronage, to interrogate these laws and interrogate these policies, and looking at what are the views of the communities. If you go to Suswa, they will tell you that they are, they don't have information, and then public participation is wanting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you for that response. And I think we are in a very critical time, because we mentioned Gen Z. We need a lot of, if it's a matter of public participation, if it's a matter of holding our leaders accountable, are we actually, as the professionals within our field, pushing for the implementations of the environment management plans, or is it a matter of we neglect our role after the implementation of this project? I want to quickly move on to the question so that everyone is given a chance to speak. I want to bring in Dominic KK. You did raise a question within the Q&A, but I believe your hand is raised. You may come in now.
Good afternoon, all. I'm
Good
Dominic Kiptore, and I wanted to ask a question because I've had the presenter on environment security mention areas of Suguta. So I don't know what he has to say about the drilling of geothermal wells in those areas of Silale and Paka, because I've realized, or I saw one time I was doing a study in those sites, that they were pumping water from Lake Baringo all the way to that direction, quite a distance. And then secondly, how sustainable is that to pump water for more than 30 kilometers from a water body to a geothermal site? How sustainable is it? Then beside that, I observed that there is a conflict because of water being pumped from Lake Baringo to the drilling site, where the drilling site is in the Pokot site and the water is coming from the Tugen side. So it had created a conflict whereby the Tugens want to claim a share of that drilling site because they say the water that will be running that side is theirs. Then, in fact, I saw some donors around that area coming up with a study on conflict-sensitive development. So maybe you can just address that.
I think before Mr. Kwani addresses that, I want to let's have all the questions come through. Then we can have the speakers respond. Next, I would like for Mr. Muya Moses to ask his question. If he's not with us. Okay, we can hear now.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. My name is Moses. My question is directed to Mr. Cliff Siocha. When he was talking about energy transition, he addressed the issue of technology and at some point highlighted how the people in the environmental field should focus on the negative effects of the storage or the batteries, the storage aspect of it. My question is now on the social and economical security of this transition, because especially when people want to consider investing in solar energy, the cost of perhaps purchasing the solar panels and the storage facilities as well is somehow a downside for most of the people. And from maybe not from a point of knowledge, but from maybe media information, is that one of the issues is because there are policies or government regulations that are making these facilities to be so expensive. So I wanted to know what is being done, or what is it that can be done by the people maybe in the energy sector, or to lobby or advocate for maybe reduced taxation on such facilities so that this transition can be just. Otherwise, it will not be something that can be taken up by people in the low-income areas. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Muya. Before we have the speakers come in and answer, I will want Miss Evelyn Atieno to raise a question, and then we can have the speakers respond. Evelyn, are you here? Are you able to speak?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. I was one of the writers in the paper with Cliff on geothermal. So I just maybe wanted to maybe add on to something he had mentioned earlier. Response to the the social impact aspect of these projects. And I just wanted to add on the Olkaria case, for example. We saw a lot of displacement where the Maasais were moved from their original villages, and it was very violent. The process was very violent, and the police just came with guns, and the community were told, you need to move because of expansion of the wells, and they were taken to the valleys where when you see where the new houses were built for them, the land is not even sustainable. They cannot graze animals there. So in the end, the school, whatever the deal they got was not sustainable enough as a compensation to the loss, and we are not just talking about the land and even the ancestral ties. There's always that social attachment to land, and people don't take into consideration when they are putting these projects, especially within indigenous areas, that it goes deeper than just holding land as a community, but there is more meaning to that and identity attached to that. So sometimes policymakers do not put this into consideration, and as a result of the failure of the Olkaria, we had a lot of contestations with the Suswa project, because they are Maasais as well, and they learned from their brothers just few kilometers away, the same locality, and they didn't want this with the coming, GDC now coming with the geothermal. So there were a lot of resistance. The community was divided. Those who wanted the project and majority were against because of the negativity that their fellow Maasais went through during the Olkaria process. It was very violent, and the community even went to court.
Yeah.
They took Kengen to court, and you can Google this. So sometimes the projects also leave trauma in some of these areas they go to, and there are no mechanisms or framework in place to deal with the social impact and of these projects. So I would just say that in terms of sustainability, once the law and the project has gone through, sometimes we lose it through the implementation process, because there are always incentives given to the communities, and sometimes these are not fulfilled. So as a result of those, unfulfilled promises that triggered a lot of anticipation and expectations, then sometimes people resist, and it can turn violent as a result of the project. It's not like indigenous communities do not want development, and we saw this also with the Paka Silale, whereby the two fictions, the Tugen and Pokot, they were contesting. It's not as a result that they do not want the geothermal, but the whole process, how it went about. And somebody asked about that in terms of, with the Paka Silale, there was no framework, the conflict sensitive approach, there was no framework in place to handle. And I just wonder also with policymakers, sometimes when they draw these projects, do they put into consideration sometimes working in areas that are very volatile or fragile in terms of existing conflicts? Like in Baringo, there has always been the cattle rustling and intercommunal conflicts. How does this play when you want to put mega billions into a project, into an area, when you've not even reconciled the communities around the project? So sometimes these projects are also put in to be like a buffer or to provide security, because the government needs access. So it's not only about energy, but we also need to look deeper. What is a project being in Suguta? Is it only about energy, or they're also in need of access? And what does that mean to the community that do not want maybe presence of the state around? It's an interference, it's an external interference. And I think also with the Suguta trough, the Turkanas are not really happy, even though the project has not happened. They're not so receptive about it, because they do not trust the process, but they also don't want that external interference. There will be a lot of government activities around. What does that mean to a community that has always been closed? So I think the social aspect sometimes is not really taken serious in as much as they do environmental assessment. And they always come up with, good points, what should be taken into consideration. But in the end, during the implementation, some of these are not always, or they overlook. And this is where they always run into problem. Like the Paka Silale it has proved to be a lot of expenses because they need time to always put the two communities together whenever they resist, and you know, they are in conflict with the management and Kengen as a whole. So it takes the project ends up even incurring extra costs instead of focusing on output. And the communities around Pakasera do not have power yet, you know, the power is now being produced. So how sustainable it is, even if we are moving towards green transition. You see it also with the Lake Turkana wind power project. The communities around the Lake Turkana, they are in the dark. The power comes to the national grid, but nobody is talking about what goes back to the community. So when we are talking about sustainability in terms of even the social impact, we don't really put this, it's not much, not much attention is always given into it. This is what I just wanted to highlight as a co-author that also worked on the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. And I think you pretty much answered the questions raised by the two participants who had asked the question. And I think what we're still asking ourselves is actually how green is green energy, and are we actually leaving no one behind as we try to achieve SDG 7 for clean energy access for all? I don't want to, before I ask anyone else or read through the comments and the Q&A, I would like to bring in Clifford. There was a question raised in terms of the...
Can I make some comment?
1 minute, please. I'm just bringing in Clifford, then I can ask you to join. For now, Mr. Clifford, there was a question that was raised in terms of, for example, that the policies that the government is implementing or is actually adopting for the cost of renewable energy. Are we actually making it affordable for everyone, or are we actually making the transition less just because it becomes more expensive or not as affordable for many who will call low income? Maybe you could make a quick input on that.
Thank you, Moses, for the question asked about the issues on technology and negative impacts on the base and all that. Also on the question of captive energy, where you have establishments, households purchasing solar panels or getting to have their own power. I think there has been some progress. And the question I know in the House is about the costing of all this, and even at the long run, the cost of power. But I may not be able to answer this directly because this is a regulatory role. But every piece and every person or every entity that is in the Ministry of Energy has a pie towards ensuring that in the long run, we have affordable energy, whether it's captive energy or whether it's off-grid or whether it's grid-based energy. And therefore, while coming up with these policies, I will say, this personal perspective then, is that there ought to be we ought to be keen as the public, and we ought to use even our representatives and get to voice our concerns on the same, so that transition is incentivized, so that we don't have exorbitant taxes on these solar panels, and everything along that line, so that we have a bit fair prices on these technologies. And again, to acknowledge is that technology, when it comes to energy, more so on solar panels, is something that is quite growing, and we have technologies coming in almost at an annual level, which again lead to a flooding of so many technologies, and therefore even as purchasers or users of this technology also have to be aware on what you really want to purchase. I know the government may want to regulate so that we don't have a flooding of these technologies, which again may lead to e-waste issues in the country, and they may want to have something that is quality in the long run. But I will say we, as a government, probably there's need to have that enabling environment, so that whoever that may want to invest in captive energy for the establishment, for their home, that they have it easy on purchase through, I think, creating incentives towards that. Thanks.
Thank you for raising up the matter of actual e-waste, as we are busy, again, mining and developing all these technologies to sustain the transition. What are the eventual impacts? Definitely the matter of e-waste comes to mind. Before I allow Stephen Wairori and John Olo to come in and raise their questions, allow me to quickly read the questions that we have on the chat. From Nikki Bungei, he says, given the impact fossil fuel has on the ecosystem, why has it taken this long to transition? I think we're also seeing that there will be an impact of the transition itself, but I'll allow the presenters to also make an answer to that. From Moteno Brian, he says, beautiful presentation, Mr. Omondi. My question is from the perspective of the Copenhagen School of Thought. What recommendations could be made to align the government's interest in promoting green energy within the mass space with the community's interest in pastoralism? Another question is, what security challenges might arise, and how does this relate to the ongoing climate action agenda of the Africa Union 2023? So probably these are three questions. Number one, given the impact of the fossil fuels, why has it taken this long to transition? I think we have kind of touched on it, but I'll allow you. But the second one is, how does the government align the interest in terms of promoting green energy as well as the community interest in pastoralism? And finally, what are the security challenges that might arise in us achieving or reaching our climate action targets, as well as the Africa Union 2063 vision? Maybe we could have a quick intervention on those questions, then I will allow Stephen and Olo to give their questions as we wrap up for now.
Secretary, may I, then my namesake will come in. Why has it taken so long? Why has it taken so long? Number one, we have to acknowledge that the government projects have a very long process for them to begin or even to break even. And most of these projects, again, you get to regard them as social projects on the other hand. Like there's no, apart from KenGen, let's say, now bring the whole aspect of the government into it. Apart from KenGen and Kenya Power, like Ketraco is 100% owned by government. So there's no balance sheet at the end of the day. So when you look at that, you get to, there's a lot of balancing, and even for those that have private equity, you have to balance them, the need of the private equity, the need of the public equity, and the community, so that you come up with this project. Allow me to tell you that by the point you see a contract on site, that project in planning and all that, the feasibility phases, the feasibility phases, project planning, pre-project activities, they have taken quite a long time. And that is how it is, so that you are sure that the project that you want to bring on board is feasible to the undertaking or to the intervention that it wants to bring on board. And therefore it takes some time, but we have to appreciate one thing. I think, let me get the name of Nikki Bungei, that it has taken quite some time. It has taken, I think, close to 2 decades to get to 90% green energy in the grid, in the entire energy mix. And of course, it will take some time, again, to get to have and stabilize the grid to the possible position that it will be. Even the established economies, matters energy, you can't say that there is an economy that is now at 100% efficient. Because of the growing technologies and the growing demands. The more technologies grow, again, you get that the load demand grows. Again, I said with climate change, there's offsetting of thresholds of even how this project should run. Now imagine you had a project that should have run at a given threshold of humidity, and you get that through climate change or any other aspect of events in weather, that these thresholds are offset. Then you have to rethink of the technology. You have to rethink of retrofitting some of these technology or equipment so that you can get to ensure they are stable in the running. And therefore, it may take some time, but by and by, we are getting there. To appreciate the efforts that have been made by Kenya, allow me give you some statistics that in sub-Saharan Africa, where Kenya is included, 600 million homes or households here are yet to be connected to power. 600, and when you translate that to the figures in terms of financing, it's immense. You can get that data from Africa Development Bank. They have that data. International Energy Agency, they have that data on what is happening in the sub-Saharan Africa. But what is the opportunity that exists in the sub-Saharan Africa, most on green energy? It's equally immense, and therefore we need to rework to get to know what then is our priority in investment, what are our priorities in getting to get back to Mwananchi and all that. There's something that was hinted on, conflict-centered development. And there's an aspect which we call social license to operate. I know a number of us here are environmentalists, but as a practicing environmentalist, then the social technical aspects and the social economic aspect of approaching and planning for projects, then it ought to be with us. At the end of the day, the government depends on us as practitioners to give them advice in the reports that we do and in the messaging that we do. But unfortunately, as a consumer of some of the reports that come from practitioners, allow me say that many times, to almost 80%, I'm disappointed with reports that come from practitioners because of what we do and what we know that we do out there. And therefore, it's high time that we do quality work. It's high time that we even also follow up on the work that you've done, so that if a given baseline that you've identified in a given study, it's not a generic baseline, and from a specific baseline given on a given study, we'll have a specific intervention. We'll not have a generic intervention. But on the otherwise is that most agencies are getting generic interventions. And therefore, again, it takes a lot of time, again, for these agencies to redefine what has come from practitioners, to put it to practice, and to now contextualize it to the project and the needs of the project. And therefore, as practitioners, we also need to do our part so that we help the developers in getting to come with the contextualized solutions and community-centered also solutions. Most of the CSRs, if I may, for government projects are dependent again with the availability of financing. And most of the power sector projects are not projects that are financed through GOK. And this should be the knowledge, because these are heavy projects. The kind of financing that's required right now, we are getting into PPPs or PIPs, but now very few projects have been financed by GOK. And therefore, what comes on board is concessional loans, and you will want to limit to what goes into that concessional loan. And most of these CSRs then are not anchored also on the concessional loan. Matters on resettlement many times, matters on CSRs are anchored on GOK as the counterpart funding. But the project funding itself comes from these concessional loans, a few grants here and there, but the grant cannot really support the kind of magnitude of national projects that the Ministry of Energy gets to develop. But yet again, in getting to do these projects, in getting to attain the social license to operate, unlike the environmental license, which is a paper, and which is visible, which you can attain and which you can also hold, the social license to operate is very fragile. And therefore, from the onset of a surveyor or of an interest of a group getting to do feasibility, social issues begin. And therefore, what is and how is the entrance of this team or the developer into a given area in getting to do the project? We have to map out and get to know what are the existing issues, how do you handle those issues? And again, my colleague said about political patronage. This is something that is clear and we need to also know it. how do you get to go about it? Because in given communities, if I'm the patron and I'm the key person over there, what I say, then my community ought to go with that. And we have had issues with this when it comes to social license to operate. And therefore, IP2 is called IPA2, or I think IPA2, International Public Participation Organization, something like that, has a spectrum on the levels of engagement that you can have with the community. But what do we usually do, even as practitioners? We only do engagement, or we only do information, but we don't run through the entire spectrum to the point of getting to partner with the community so that you can undertake those projects. And therefore, to the point of undertaking the project, you get that the information that had been passed through the project development wasn't clear. And therefore, there is need, when we do our mapping, when we do our pre-feasibility, we get to establish what is the kind of messaging that we do to a given community. What are the prevailing issues within this community? How are we going to map out our communication plan to this community? What is the essence of this community? And what are the community-led initiatives that will get into the success of this project, so that at the end of the day, the community is not does not feel that it's us versus the community, but gets to have the sense of ownership and the sense of involvement in the entire area. Lastly, as I get to in the community areas or community land, there's a Community Land Act of 2016. And the kind of issue that right now is heavy, even when getting to deal with this, is that for unregistered community land, the Community Land Act states that the county governments shall hold trust of this land on behalf of this community. And therefore, if I want to do a project within a given community, what that means, if it's unregistered, the dues that are upon them duly for compensation may not go to the community directly. They will be held in trust of this community by the county government, to such a point that this community then registers their land as a registered entity. But how long will this take? Again, our devolved units are quite political. We do not know what happens within 5 years. And when you look at most of these areas, more so in the north, you get that one county has like 6 communities in it. And if one governor comes in within this term, it's seen that it's not the county that has a governor, it's a given community that has a governor. And therefore, when you get that project is on the other community that is not in governorship as of now, they view the one on the seat as not someone they can trust. That is it. And therefore, how do we get to handle this? Yet we have the law to which we have to comply with. And therefore, the technicalities that we get to look at that, then you have to engage specialists in it so that you can look at the law and get to see what areas then, if it be a lacuna or any other area which you can exploit and get to have the social license to operate. Like one of them is agree with the community so that there are dues for compensation, which should have been given probably to a community of 1 million people, of 500,000 people, and you have dues of compensation. Will you give this money to 500,000 people? I mean, at the end of the day, if they did some divisions, everyone will get 1,000 shillings at the end of the day. Then you will get to discuss with them what projects with, of course,
Mr. Spatial, wants to cut you off there. Maybe you could wrap up.
Yes, in partnership with the developer and the county, of course, coming in, what projects can be undertaken in support of this community in lieu of compensation. And therefore, we have a few areas that need to be ironed out, and I'm eager to see what will come out from the amendment of the Community Land Act. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we all are or agree, or we can see, especially with what the different aspects as we are raising, not only, or what the nation is actually going through, not only affecting or at least bringing in the aspect of, in terms of political accountability, are we actually having responding to actually the needs of our people in this case. I want to quickly wrap up, but just the final question from Mr. Stephen Wairori, who has had his hand raised for a while. That will be the final question. And then I will ask the two presenters to give in their closing remarks. Then we will we'll wrap up from there. Mr. Wairori, kindly 1 minute.
Thank you, facilitator. And I also want to appreciate the two presenters for the presentations. My question goes to Mr. Omondi, the one who has touched on the issue of environmental security. When you look at the broader picture within which environmental security is situated, you find we do have economic security, food, and the other 6 or so aspects. How does the geothermal project within that particular area relate to the broad picture of human security within which environmental security is situated? Thank you.
Mr. Okwanya, did you hear the question? Are you with
Yes,
us?
yes. And can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yes, I think Stephen's question is very valid, and this is what this is actually what our research focuses on, trying to understand human security aspect. And of course, as I said, environmental security is a garden of so many concepts, and one of it is the natural, the safety of the ecosystem, or rather, if you want, you could say the normative nature. What does security offers? The security will offers us, it will remove the threat. We aim to remove the threat, and so that we can be safe. But as my earlier presenter, Cliff, mentioned, and actually Cliff just mentioned the great, Cliff emphasized on political patronage. You find that we have much better laws. Just look at the energy laws in Kenya. Our laws are very good. They project public participation. They project how communities are going to be involved in this. But these laws are interpreted or are stipulated by brucolars, what I call institutional brucolage, where you find that a brucola is a handyman who just, they create something out of nothing, or they create, they come up with, they interpret the laws to fit their own benefits. This is what Cliff emphasized earlier. So that you find the community interest is not being articulated. Rather, human security is not emphasized, or is not being stipulated in these laws. So maybe I just wrap up by pointing out, someone pointed about Salale and Paka, and how Lake Baringo gets water. These projects get water from Lake Baringo. Environmental specialists will tell us where Lake Baringo gets their water. Baringo is situated in a semi-humid, semi-arid area, and therefore already water is a challenge. Some of the water come from Nakuru, some of the water come from it comes from Baringo district and Laikipia district and so on. And if you want to read more about Lake Baringo, you can look at there's a very great scholar called Eric Odada, wrote about Lake Baringo and its sustainability. So you find that Lake Baringo itself, it's not sustainable. The rivers feeding Lake Baringo do not have adequate rainfall, and the climate experts can give us those numbers. So it is a problem. Again, on the social aspect, you find that, of course, Turgen and Pokot are already in conflict over the water. So then you find that the social aspect of it is not being addressed. And someone asked about the recommendation. I think recommendation lies on the laws that we have. Just look at the energy policy, look at the Energy Act 2019, and even the Community Land Act. These are laws which stipulate the interest of the people. So it is there. You know, the recommendation are already there in our good laws. You know, Climate Change Act stipulate community participation and so on. But who interprets community participation is another case, is another question for another day. And again, just to finish, someone talked about why is it taking long to transition? Look at these projects, geothermal projects. You will find that most of these projects are either sponsored by JICA, that is Japan International Cooperation Agency. They are being, they are projects funded by European Investment Bank, World Bank, and the German bank, and so on. So you find that there's an international interest when it comes to this. So the government has to project the interest of these international funders. So that's, and then again, with the conflict in these areas, you know, if you go to Suguta Trough, you know, this area is a semi-territoriality. There is no police in this area. If you go there, you know, Suguta has been named as the Valley of Death, where police are killed were killed in this area, 1996 and 2012. So the issue of security comes there, and then so these are some of the issues. The social issues as well are very critical, and Cliff already explained so much about it. So I think the recommendations are there. We look at our laws. If our laws are implemented, I think we will get to a green transition. But again, the challenge is the water. Is it transition? Is it sustainable? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Omondi. I do not want to lock anyone out. The final hand was raised by Magdalene. Exactly 1 minute. I want us to close at exactly 1:15. I hope it's a comment, if not a question, and then we'll be able to wrap on this. In the meantime, I have put in a link on the chat for your feedback on the webinar that we have had, the information session. We would like to get your feedback in terms of where we can improve and what other interesting topics that you'd like us to address in the near future. Is Magdalene here, or she's put her hand down?
I wanted to, can I talk, please?
Yes, go ahead. 1 minute, please.
Yeah, thank you, Clifford and Omondi. You have done a very good presentation. Kindly next time you can talk something on climate financing and energy sector in addition to climate change solution. Thank you.
Thank you. As I've said, this is one of the areas we are looking forward to have this engagement as we build up to our conference that is happening in just a quick minute. I want to be able to allowed to share the screen, but I think, as I've said, thank you once again to all the presenters, to both the presenters who are able to engage with us today, and for the participants who were able to join and stay with us. We were over 100 and nearly at 120. So I want to say thank you very much for joining us for this training. And once again, as we said, this is going to be the first of several info webinar series aside from our trainings that we continually have as EIK, so that we can build up momentum for the EIK conference that is happening this October, and we hope that you have registered with us. I want to probably ask any of my colleagues if they could put in the conference registration link on the chat. I have put in the feedback form, which we want to hear from you. I think, as Magdalene has given an example of climate finance, we are looking into that. We're looking into the speakers, as well as how we can best structure this information webinars that we will continuously have as we build up to the conference. Not only that, this is 10 years of EIK. We hope that we'll be able to have a celebration during the same conference for all of us to celebrate and look back at what 10 years of EIK has been, the growth that we've had, and all the ups and downs that we've had at this moment. I'm not sure why I am unable to share my screen. But then I don't know if there's any commentary from any of the other EIK members here with us. From the chair, Mr. Mugambi, I don't know if you're here. I may not be able to see him. Mr. Edwin Otieno, are you able to give closing remarks?
Yes. Thank you, Zelda. I think mine would just be to emphasize. I think the last webinar we had on social safeguards and this webinar we've had today had a bit of a connection when it comes to just a general. And my remark would be, yes, as EIK, we are more determined to continue. I've had a very interesting comment from Mr. Clifford talking about generic, how do we call it, generic baseline, giving generic solution. I think it's something that is there, and I think I did comment that indeed there is also the other part of financing the assessment that now gives us a cycle, because it's a challenge you experience in the field. So mine would just be, number one, to invite us all. This conference will have a lot of insights. These are the conversations you're going to have there. And we've seen a lot of questions and a lot of deliberations on this. So we encourage all of us who are here, kindly sign up and set aside your time to just join us for the conference on the 22nd to the 25th of December. I believe it will be a very good time to just engage with industry players and the keynote speakers, so that one, there is space for networking opportunities, identifying opportunities, and this just is a build up on the general our objective as EIK to bring together experts and professionals in the environmental industry for a sustainable future. Yes, I also am aware that maybe a good number of us who joined some of our webinars are not necessarily EIK members. We also encourage you to subscribe with us and join our Environment Institute of Kenya, because together we are able to also just the benefits that comes with that. Then also these webinars and more webinars and trainings that are coming are just designed to add value to the membership, so that in the fullness of time we are able to even grow professionally, because the trainings capture an entire array. A calendar is shared towards the end of the year for the rest of the year, and we believe you should be able to just see value in being in the membership with us. So thank you so much, Zelda, and as the organizer, together with all the other presenters. And I believe even for the rest of the year, as well as the conference, we should be able to just engage more and just build the profession, and as well also just have an opportunity to advise the world and the government and the societies that and the areas that and the field we work on. Thank you. Zelda, I think you are on mute. Huh? We can't hear you.
Apologies, I thought you could hear me. Once again, thank you so much for being with us, for each and every one of us, to our speakers, Mr. Clifford Siocha and Mr. Clifford Omondi. We want to say thank you for starting and holding this engagement, sharing with us your thoughts. And thank you to everyone who was able to engage with us, not only here, but also on our socials. We do not take that for granted at all. Once again, I may refer you back to the chat. We have sent in some few links there. Number one, for the conference. Number two, we have for the webinar feedback form from the webinar in terms of how best we can be able to serve you in terms of this case, as well as our membership registration. We welcome all members. This is a professional network for all environmentalists, no matter which aspect of the environment you are an expert in or you are growing in. Not only that, we also welcome the students to join us. We do have student membership. So we look forward to continuously engage with all of you. And we thank you immensely once again, finally, for this, for joining us for this session. I think I will leave the chat or the meeting to run for the next 5 minutes, or at least everyone is out in the next 5 minutes. If you do have any comments, we will still follow them on the chat and we'll be able to close with that. Thank you once again and have a good evening. Shukran.
Thank you.